Hello and welcome back to Collector Creations. In this video we're looking at Imprint's release of Death Valley from 1982. This is the nice glossy slipcover they have. It is number 361 of their continuous reign of films. And of course it has a back sleeve as well, detailing what the film's about, all of the special features and all the extra jazz. I'll dive into the video, the audio, and every little detail. It does have alternate artwork on the inside, which is nice. This was the re-release artwork, re-release as in from later in the year, to try to emphasize the slasher boom, and well, let's just say it didn't really work very well. Nevertheless, you get inside artwork as well, which may or may not be a spoiler when you actually watch the film. Technically, you'll forget it by the time you actually watch it. Don't worry about it. So let's talk about the film. Again, this is a standard release from them. It is an hour and 28 minutes long. It is in 1080p, 185:1, so it covers the whole entire screen. It comes with two audio options. I was about to say three. Two audio options: DTS HD 5.1 surround sound, despite not being actually noted on the website, and LPCM 2.0 stereo. I listened to the 5.1. It wasn't bad. It also has English language subtitles. Video-wise, it had a really nice transfer, apart from a few blemishes every once in a while, which were very rare and, indiscreet. They never were a bother or whatever. This is just a really nice transfer. I'm surprised it doesn't emphasize it's a 4K or a 2K scan or anything. Maybe it's just a really good print that they happen to get, whether they got it from another company or whatever. But in this case, it is a very good way to watch the film because it looks amazing. The close-ups in particular look really nice. It looks clean. There's a good healthy amount of grain as well, but none of it gets too buzzy, none of it gets too fuzzy. It's just really good. I don't know, it's a solid, regular transfer, which is great. Audio-wise, I listened to the 5.1 surround sound, and it was, strong sound, clear dialogue and everything. I never had to turn it up or down or whatever. The music is probably what takes up the surround sound speakers, because there's not a lot going on in the background speakers, unlike in the foreground. There's no parts in particular where someone runs past the camera and you hear them behind you. None of it really stood out to me. But the music-wise at least encompasses the whole thing to some degree, which is nice because it's got a great orchestral mix to it. Mostly strings, there's some harmonica in there. It's a really, nice kind of simple, but I'd say simple score, but it's not hugely big, except for during the more frightening scenes where it gets a bit more bombastic, maybe a bit dramatically so, but nevertheless it works out pretty well. There were occasional clicks on the left-hand side within the first, 20-odd minutes of the film, but they vanished very soon into it. I'd say maybe after the 15-minute mark. But again, it was very, very rarely that I heard it. It might have just been a speaker issue on my part rather than actually the film itself, but outside of that, the audio sounded good, the video looked good. It does come with an audio commentary by the director, Dick Richards. I have not looked into the commentary at all, but I believe it's an archival commentary. It's there. It's on the track, which is good. It's always nice to have a director commentary. When it comes to the rest of the special features, you get, outside of a teaser trailer or theatrical trailer, either way, you get a trailer and a TV spot. You do get a video essay and an interview. The interview is called Strings and Screams, which is an interview with composer Dana Kaproff, which is a 12.5-minute long interview where Dana talks about his experience with music and the film. He discusses why he chose this style of music and how the director responded to his suggestions and his stylings. It plays as a voiceover on top of footage from the film with the score in the background, which is nice. It's mostly the main theme for the whole 12 minutes, but it's a really nice, comforting theme. It works really nicely. It's nicely produced for what it is, and it gives you a nice, interesting perspective on the musical side, and it's short and sweet. The video essay, on the other hand, is called Sliced and Spliced, The Rise of the Slasher Subgenre and the Fall of the Studio Slasher Film. So many S's. This is a video essay by film historian Jared Kahan from 2024. It's a 32-minute long video essay that dives into the slasher subgenre from, the early 60s with Psycho and the other one that I can never remember the name of, where the guy with the They came out the same year. It talks about them, and then it dives into, you know, giallo cinema and how they influenced the later American boom of slasher films, like both introducing like just the tone and the stylings and what makes a slasher film, even doing comparisons between A Bay of Blood and stuff like Friday the 13th and Halloween, which is really nice, so that you get some good visual contrast and stuff like that. There's some spoilers in the films. If you've never seen any of them, it does emphasize certain details. Not particularly twists, but at least it does show you a bunch of kills, and it does detail certain events, whether you want to get into giallo or not. Given there were some of them there that I've never seen before, I did skim through a bit of it, because I'm like, I don't need to know the complete juxtaposition between A Bay of Blood and Friday the 13th, because I haven't seen A Bay of Blood yet, and I'd like to kind of experience it for the first time. So if you're someone who has a shitty memory and doesn't remember all the stuff that he talks about, like in terms of the visuals that are shown on screen, then it won't particularly spoil your experience. But if you happen to go from this exact release with this exact video essay into a bunch of giallos, you might get a bit spoiled. But nevertheless, not bad. You know, it eventually dives into the 80s boom with, you know, Halloween and whatnot, and how they panned in terms of like critical success and financial success. And this is 20 minutes in, I'm thinking, okay, he hasn't talked about Death Valley yet, what's happening? But at the 22-minute mark, after talking about Halloween 2, he talks about Death Valley and basically talks about how it worked within the ecosystem of slasher films being released at the time, how they released it in January, it didn't do well, they re-released it later in the year, it also didn't do well, but it was also from the studio who was doing like Friday the 13th, and they needed something whilst they were working on Friday the 13th Part 3, so he gives enough historical context as to why the film was basically released twice and hence had two different forms of artwork, the main one on the sleeve and the one on the inside, because it basically tried to emphasize the slasher element, but only really the main artwork actually is accurate to the film, whereas the inside artwork is what could have happened in the scene if the killer didn't do that. Or didn't do what he actually did, which was bust down a door, but using his knife to like cut off the hinges and then bust into it. But because he didn't need to break in. But the image makes it seem like he's grabbing him through the door. It doesn't matter. So there's a good 4 or 5 minutes talking about Death Valley and basically why it didn't work on release. And he says that there was a mixed critical reception towards the film, but at the same time, there was with most of the slasher genre at the time anyway. Even Halloween wasn't considered so highly until it just suddenly was. The latter half of the video essay dives into basically how the late 80s became either like indie slashers or Nightmare on Elm Street, and then talking about Scream and H2O and the eventual 2018 Halloween reboot. So basically the rise and fall, and it was actually nicely dedicated to Lee Gambon, which is nice, like as something that, you know, given Jarrett and myself were friends of Lee's, it's nice to see that, and Lee loved the slasher films. Jarrett even talks about Halloween 3 within it, which is nice, so yeah, of course he's given it the historical perspective, he's not giving any personal notes or opinions about these films, but it's nice nevertheless, so yeah, it's a nicely produced video essay, especially if you haven't seen a bunch of slashers or if you really want that. The film itself, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars, I think it's got some nice performances. Again, it's nicely shot with a good score and some nice direction. It's a family drama about a kid who's like, I don't know, 5 or 6. It's the kid who's in A Christmas Story. And like the year before he did that. And so it's him, I think it's Catherine Hendricks, I think that's her name, probably wrong on that, but it's the mother from the Child's Play film, so she's also someone who's known in the horror circles, Catherine Hicks. It also has Paul Le Mat and Stephen McHattie, and even Wilfred Brimley, which was great. Like, gotta love Wilfred Brimley just showing up. But no, it was a nice cast. It focuses very much so on that family drama dynamic, and it just, that they happen to cross paths with a serial killer. So, and it's definitely a serial killer who's been in the area before. It's got a lot of history to it, but that's like subtly there, and I like it. A lot of the stuff is shown through actions instead of overly discussed until it needs to be. You know, the kills aren't few and far between. They're not too gory, mostly just a kind of slash and dash on people's necks, on their throats. And, you know, there's one minor section of nudity, which is in the first slasher kill, and it also feels kind of like, wow, this just kind of came out of nowhere. But it builds in this kind of slasher thriller element within the film, which has already been subtly built up through the thriller element before it becomes a slasher that isn't consistently slasher, which also fits the motive of the villain. They also pull a twist ending, which I expected because I was paying attention. But, you know, it works well enough. It's a pretty fine film. I found it enjoyable. And I think that this is a really nice release from Imprint. You know, the artwork's nice, which I like the prize mostly when it comes to from Imprint. But because the video transfer is really nice, if you haven't got this, which it is a region-free release, I would highly recommend it. Again, 5.1 and 2.0 stereo, you get the original commentary, and you get two nice, you know, a video essay and an interview of the composer. So it's a decent package and a pretty decent film, especially if you're into the 80s slasher boom. So yeah, feel free to check it out, and I'll see you kids next time. Adios.